Johnny Carson's Tonight Show was more than late-night TV for 30 years. It was a national ritual, a cultural campfire around which millions of Americans gathered nightly. A spot on Carson's stage was not merely another job, it was a career moment. For comedians, it was the distinction between obscurity and stardom. For actors, musicians, and writers, it was the greatest indicator that they had reached the mainstream of American society. Carson's couch had started careers, solidified reputations, and turned one-time unknown performers into household names. One good laugh line on his stage could ensure the future of a comic, while a friendly interview on his couch could win over a celebrity to millions of viewers in a matter of hours. But, as many in Hollywood learned, Carson's Tonight Show was not a free-for-all where anything could happen. Behind the perpetual grin and the smooth, steady professionalism, Johnny was an individual of stern standards, unwritten rules, and a memory that never forgot a resentment. Cross him once, and you frequently didn't get a second shot. If this kind of story touches your heart, if you're someone who cares about truth, responsibility, and speaking up for the voiceless, please like this video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who should hear it. Let's get started. That's what's so interesting about the following stories. The 8 stars who were essentially blackballed from The Tonight Show after one show. Some were veterans who felt they were above playing by the rules. Others were upstarts who blundered badly in front of the most critical crowd of their lives. In every instance, Carson's reaction was quick, firm, and absolute. These anecdotes not only uncover the human drama beneath the sheen of late-night television, but also offer a glimpse into the personality of a man who, for 3 decades, was America's most trusted entertainer, and arguably its most quietly uncompromising. The earliest and perhaps best known of these was Tony Clifton, the onstage persona of comedian Andy Kaufman. To the uninitiated, Tony Clifton was a boastful, rude lounge singer, complete with tacky suits, cigar smoke, and a whiskey-roughened voice. But Clifton was no routine act. He was Kaufman's intentionally abrasive construct, intended to provoke, befuddle, and occasionally downright alienate. In 1979, The Tonight Show bookers, hungry for something new, agreed to bring in Clifton. They'd been forewarned that Kaufman's personality might be volatile, but they thought they were hiring a colorful character who would provide Carson with some material to react off. What they received instead was pandemonium. Clifton came to NBC smelling of alcohol, though his flask contained water instead of liquor, and promptly set about provoking NBC employees. When Carson, as was his habit, tried to make small talk before the taping to anticipate what might ensue, Clifton exhaled cigar smoke into his face and addressed him as Johnny Boy. That in itself was sufficient to trigger warnings. Once the cameras were rolling, the performance deteriorated into a catastrophe. Clifton sang a butchered song, insulted a woman in the front row, and then threw a glass of water at the show's bandleader, Doc Severinsen. For Johnny Carson, who maintained strict control of his stage, it was the ultimate affront. He immediately cut to commercial, and security bodily removed Clifton from the building during the break. Carson, generally unruffled, allegedly swore. One of the few occasions when staff members heard him use profanity, mandating that Clifton never darken the studio door again. Although Kaufman himself was not officially banished at the time, his friendship with Carson chilled, and Clifton's visit became the stuff of cautionary tales in late-night legend. If Clifton was chaos by intention, Madonna's 1987 visit was uncomfortable for very different reasons. By the time Madonna made it to the couch, she was the pop queen, a provocateur who lived for scandal. Producers were anticipating fireworks, perhaps even controversy, but what they received was an awkwardly stiff interaction that left Carson visibly uncomfortable. To start with, Madonna made Carson wait backstage, an abomination for the punctual host. Once on the sofa, she gave brief responses, showed disdain, and even schooled Carson on fame, as if he could never comprehend her degree of fame. Given Carson had interviewed Elvis, Sinatra, and the Beatles, the statement was ridiculous and inflammatory. While Johnny was professional on the air, behind the scenes, he made it clear she would not return during his tenure. Madonna, to her credit, subsequently acknowledged that she hadn't exactly made a good impression. Nonetheless, The harm was done. In Carson's mind, she was scratched off the list. The Robert Blake case was more sinister. Most famous for his performance in Beretta, Blake was already perceived as being intense and sometimes unstable in Hollywood. His 1981 appearance on The Tonight Show, meant to promote his film Secondhand Hearts, quickly deteriorated into a combative confrontation. Instead of light conversation, Blake launched into bitter complaints about Hollywood, the studio system, and his disdain for promotional interviews. When Carson attempted a joke to lighten the mood, Blake cut him off cold. "I'm not here to be funny. I'm here to tell the truth." For Johnny, interrupting his jokes was a cardinal sin. The segment grew increasingly uncomfortable, culminating in Blake delivering a grim monologue about child actor exploitation, graphic enough to alarm censors. Afterward, Carson simply said, "No return engagement necessary." For Blake, whose career was already at a fragile turning point, losing access to Carson's platform was devastating, cutting off a crucial lifeline to mainstream audiences. Next was Truman Capote, the famous writer of In Cold Blood and Breakfast at Tiffany's. In the 1960s, Capote had been a wry, urbane guest on Carson's show, entertaining viewers with his acerbic wit. By 1975, though, addiction had ravaged him. He showed up at the studio drunk, slurring his speech and forgetting what he was saying. Carson struggled to recover the interview gallantly, basically doing both sides of the conversation. But when Capote started making salacious, possibly libelous comments regarding other stars, Carson cut the segment abruptly, something he did very seldom. Although Capote was not officially banned, he was quietly put on the shelf for years. When he would have been given another chance by the time it happened, his health had declined too much, and he passed away in 1984 without ever getting a chance to come back. Don Rickles is an interesting contrast. The insult comedy king, Rickles was a frequent guest on Carson's program, and the two had a light-hearted relationship founded on pretended annoyance. But in the early 1970s, Rickles went too far by making jokes about Carson's alimony payments and divorce, topics Johnny decreed absolutely off-limits. Although he completed the feature in a professional manner, Carson was seriously upset. Rickles found himself frozen out for nearly a year. Eventually, he worked his way back into Johnny's good graces in classic Rickles fashion. During a roast, he publicly joked, "I'm not afraid of you, Johnny." "Okay, I'm a little afraid of you. Please let me back on the show." Carson laughed, and the ice thawed. Rickles returned and remained a fixture, but he never again touched Johnny's personal life. Not all of the bans were about couch behavior. In the case of Chevy Chase, it was about off-camera behavior. Carson went on one of his routine vacations in 1977 and gave Chase, who was hot off the success of Saturday Night Live, a week as guest host. Rather than working within Carson's format, Chase wrote off Carson's format as old news, disregarded the advice of staff, and treated crew members like children. His on-camera manner was ungainly, replete with uncalled-for pratfalls that interrupted interviews. Carson was showered with complaints by the time he got back from his notoriously loyal crew. For Johnny, that was sufficient. Chase was gone for good. The irony was that Carson had earlier thought of Chase as a future heir. After the fateful week, that option vanished altogether. The tale of Charles Grodin is one of miscommunication. In 1973, the actor showed up on The Tonight Show with a plan to act a role, an intransigent, argumentative guest who tested Johnny at every opportunity. The only problem was he didn't inform anyone, not the producers, not Carson. The outcome was an interview so strained and painful that the audience didn't know whether it was staged or in part. Carson, caught off guard, gamely attempted to play along but was clearly annoyed at being surprised. Grodin wasn't invited back for years. Eventually, after the bit was settled and both sides knew the game, Grodin came back and their fake arguments became a much-loved recurring feature. But the first time almost ended his opportunity for The Tonight Show forever. Lastly, there was Bette Davis, Hollywood legend and two-time Oscar winner. By 1972, Davis was a living legend, and her showing should have been a success. Instead, it became a nightmare for Carson's staff. Davis came with an entourage and a set of demands. Special lighting, camera angle approval, a prohibition on discussing certain subjects, and even a request that no other guests would be shown on the show. Although producers obliged what they were able to, they would not honor cancellations for other bookings. On the set, Davis kept gesturing to camera operators, bellowing lighting orders, and even demanded Carson step aside because he was in her best position. Johnny, proud of being boss of his own show, was fed up. Between commercials, he informed her sternly, "This is how we do the show. If that won't suit you, we can wrap it up right here." Davis ended the segment but was never asked back. For Carson, the problem wasn't diva behavior. He could deal with that. It was the trying to stage direct his show from the couch that went too far. Together, these 8 stories give a rich portrait of Johnny Carson as not only a gracious late-night host, but also as a man with firm limits, good instincts, and a fierce determination to preserve the integrity of his show. He knew it was his responsibility to make his guests stand out, but only in the framework he had constructed. Those who honored that format were rewarded with second and third invitations and the career establishment that came with them. Those who didn't were discreetly, sometimes permanently ushered out the door. For audience members at home, The Tonight Show was a nightly retreat to laughter and repartee. For those who occupied Carson's couch, it was a chance, but also an exam. And if you flunked Johnny Carson's test, there